My name is Sarah Thompson. I'm 25 and I've lived alone in a small apartment in downtown Milwaukee for almost 2 years. I'm pretty independent and I've always loved Halloween. The costumes, the decorations, even the eerie vibes. My friends and I had been planning to go to a Halloween party for weeks, and I was excited to finally have a night out. But this Halloween turned into the kind of night I'd never want to relive. That night, I threw on a classic witch costume, black dress, pointed hat, and a touch of dark makeup. My friends and I arrived at the party around 9 p.m. It was held at this old warehouse downtown, decorated with fake spider webs, eerie lights, and everyone was decked out in full Halloween spirit. The music was loud, and the energy was high. I felt safe surrounded by my friends, dancing and laughing without a care. But about an hour into the party, I started feeling uneasy. It was like this strange sensation that someone was watching me. When I glanced across the room, that's when I saw him. A guy in a Jason Voorhees mask, standing near the corner by himself, staring right at me. I couldn't see his eyes clearly, but I knew they were locked onto me. I tried to shrug it off, thinking it was just someone being creepy. It's Halloween, after all, right? People wear masks and act weird. But every time I looked back, he was still staring. As the night went on, he didn't stop. I moved around the room with my friends, trying to lose him in the crowd. But he'd always reappear in my line of sight, just staring, silent and still. He never tried to talk or get close, but something about his presence sent chills down my spine. I leaned over to my friend Jessie and told her about the guy in the mask. She laughed, saying he was probably trying to scare me, but promised to keep an eye out. Finally, as the party started to die down, I told my friends I was ready to head home. They walked me outside, but by then, I had convinced myself the guy was just some harmless stranger and wouldn't follow me. I figured he'd stay at the party, move on to the next target, and my unease would end as soon as I left. I took an Uber back to my apartment, and as I approached my building, the quiet of the street began to settle my nerves. But as I reached the entrance, I noticed a figure standing near the bushes by the front door. My stomach twisted when I realized it was the guy from the party. He was still wearing the Jason mask, just standing there, waiting. The hairs on my neck prickled as he took a single step toward me. Trying to keep my composure, I backed away, fumbling in my bag for my phone. I managed to dial 911, and with my voice shaking, I whispered to the operator that someone was stalking me outside my building. I didn't dare look away from the masked man, afraid of what he might do if I did. Within minutes, I heard the sirens. As the police car turned onto my street, the man bolted. He disappeared into the darkness between the buildings, leaving me trembling on the steps. The officers searched the area, but found nothing. They assured me they'd keep an eye on my neighborhood and told me to call if anything strange happened again. I tried to believe it was over, that he was just some random creep who had finally been scared off. But it wasn't over. 2 days later, I found a note slipped under my door. It read, "You can't hide." My heart raced, and I ran to my door, locking it tight, every possible latch secured. For weeks, similar notes kept appearing. Sometimes a simple, "I see you," other times just my name scribbled in shaky handwriting. I barely slept, jumping at every sound, checking my locks constantly, feeling like I was losing my mind. One night, I woke up to a soft scratching at my door. I didn't dare approach it. I just sat frozen in bed, clutching my phone. I dialed 911 again, but by the time the police arrived, whoever was at my door had gone. The notes, the scratching, it all kept happening. The police would show up, but the man was always gone by the time they arrived. Finally, after weeks of constant dread, the police called me with news. They had arrested a man living just 2 doors down from me. His name was Eric Mason, a quiet guy I'd seen around the building but never thought twice about. In his apartment, they found dozens of photos of me, some taken through my windows. But the most chilling discovery was a Jason Voorhees mask, tucked neatly in his closet. He had been watching me for months, planning who knows what, biding his time. Even after he was arrested, the image of that mask haunts me. I can't shake the feeling that someone might still be out there, watching. Halloween used to be my favorite night of the year. Now, I keep my doors locked tight and pretend it's just another night. My name is Oliver Trent. I'm 34 years old and live in a quiet suburb just outside Denver, Colorado. Halloween in our neighborhood is usually one of my favorite nights of the year. I love seeing the decorations, the kids dressed up, their excitement over candy. It all brings a little life to our otherwise sleepy streets. But last Halloween left a mark that I can't shake, something that still haunts me every time October rolls around. That night, I had set up my usual decorations, a few carved pumpkins, some fake cobwebs, and a creepy skeleton by the door. I'd bought bags of candy, expecting the usual flow of trick-or-treaters from around 6 p.m. onward. But something felt off. The street was unusually quiet, and only a few groups of kids came by. I kept glancing out the window, waiting for more, but by 9 p.m., the streets were almost completely empty. It wasn't just the lack of kids that felt wrong. There was this heavy silence, the kind that feels thick, like the calm before a storm. I remember watching the street lamp flickering outside, wondering if something had happened to keep people inside. Eventually, I decided to call it a night, blew out the jack-o'-lanterns, and went to bed, that unsettling quiet still pressing against the walls of my home. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone was flooded with messages, and the local news station was showing live coverage from my neighborhood. 3 kids had gone missing while trick-or-treating, all from houses just a few doors down from mine. They were last seen on my street, only a few houses away. A pit formed in my stomach as I looked at the photos of the missing kids on the screen. Recognizing their faces from years of Halloween visits, they were regulars, kids I'd handed candy to every Halloween since I'd moved here. The police swarmed the area, asking every resident if they had noticed anything unusual. When they reached my door, I felt guilty even though I'd done nothing wrong. I told them about the strange quiet that had hung over the night and how I'd only seen a few trick-or-treaters, but there wasn't much else to say. I hadn't seen anything or anyone suspicious. Days passed, and the neighborhood felt different. Parents held their kids close, whispers spread among the neighbors, and every day we waited for news. Then, about a week later, the police released footage from a doorbell camera a few houses down. It showed the 3 missing kids, costumes and all, approaching a white van parked on the street. The van was old and slightly rusted, and just looking at it sent a chill down my spine. Then the door opened, and someone dressed as a clown stepped out, holding a bag of candy. I watched the footage in horror as the clown waved them over, motioning them closer with exaggerated, playful gestures. The kids seemed hesitant, but the person in the clown costume kept urging them, holding out handfuls of candy. Finally, they approached the van, and one by one, they climbed inside. The door shut, and the van drove off into the night. The police searched every inch of the town, looking for any sign of that van, but it was like it vanished into thin air. They checked security footage, combed through nearby highways, even put out an alert for anyone who had seen a white van or a person dressed as a clown. But days turned into weeks, and nothing came up. It was as if that van, and the kids inside, had never existed. Halloween lost its charm after that. Every time I hear kids laughing in costumes or see a clown costume, I get that same sick feeling in my stomach. I can't stop thinking about those kids, remembering how close they were, just steps away from my own front door. They were right there, and none of us knew the danger lurking in the shadows. A year has passed, and now Halloween is around the corner again. I haven't put up any decorations, and my candy bowl remains empty. I don't want to answer the door, don't want to see those kids' faces in every trick-or-treater who might show up. Every time I see a white van drive by, my heart skips a beat. I know it's probably not the same one, but it doesn't matter. The memory is enough. The neighborhood is quieter now, parents more cautious, kids staying closer to home. But no matter what they do, those kids are still gone, and the person who took them is still out there. Sometimes, late at night, I hear sounds outside, like faint laughter or the hum of an engine passing by. And I wonder if he's back, waiting for more kids. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe on Halloween again. Those kids were right here, on my street, and no one could help them. The worst part is knowing they were taken so close to my home, that I had been just steps away, unaware that a nightmare was unfolding just beyond my door. My name is Jack. I'm 30 years old, and I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio with my two kids, Ben, who's 8, and Timmy, who's 5. Halloween has always been a big deal for us, so I made sure to take them trick-or-treating like I do every year. The streets were packed with kids dressed in costumes, running door to door, excited to collect as much candy as possible. Everything was normal. The usual houses, friendly neighbors, and kids giggling with excitement. But then, we came across one house that felt different. It belonged to an elderly woman who I'd never really seen before. Her house was a little rundown, with old Halloween decorations that looked like they'd been there for years. When she opened the door, she smiled at the boys, but something about her felt off. She handed out homemade candy wrapped in wax paper. It was strange. Most people handed out regular store-bought candy, but she was different. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it in front of the kids, so I let it slide, thinking it was harmless. By the time we got home, the boys were on a sugar high, sorting through their candy. Ben and Timmy were laughing, trading pieces, comparing who got the best stuff. That woman's candy stuck out, homemade and wrapped differently. Timmy asked if he could try one. I hesitated, but then figured it was fine. Just a sweet old lady, right? That was my biggest mistake. About an hour later, Timmy complained that his stomach hurt. I figured it was too much candy, but then he started throwing up. His face went pale, and he was sweating. My heart sank. Then he started shaking. I grabbed him and rushed to the hospital, Ben sitting terrified in the back seat. At the hospital, they took Timmy in right away. I sat there with Ben, trying to stay calm, but I was terrified. After what felt like forever, a doctor came out and told me that Timmy had been poisoned. My mind raced. I kept thinking, how? Then it hit me. The candy from that old woman. I told the doctor, and they called the police. They asked me about the candy and the woman, and I described everything. They went to her house that night. What they found was horrifying. She had been lacing her homemade candies with lethal chemicals. She had no specific target, just random kids. The police told me they found enough poison in her house to kill dozens of children. I felt sick to my stomach. The thought that I had been so close to losing Timmy was unbearable. If I hadn't gotten him to the hospital in time. I can't even think about it. The guilt was overwhelming. I had let him eat that candy, despite my gut telling me something was off. Timmy eventually pulled through, but things haven't been the same since. Halloween, once a fun tradition, now fills me with dread. I can't let the boys go trick-or-treating anymore. It's too risky, and I can't shake the memory of that night. The woman's house is still there, boarded up now. It stands as a reminder of what happened, and every time I drive by, I feel that same fear and guilt. I can still see her standing there, smiling that strange smile, handing out her deadly treats. I realize how close I came to losing my son, and it haunts me every year when Halloween rolls around. It's a night I'll never forget.